Hi everyone, I'm Hayley. I'm always in the craft room and I have a beautiful new skirt to show you this week. It started with the fabric. It is a viscose crepe from Rainbow Fabrics 3 or 4 years ago, and if I hold this piece of fabric up, tell me what's the first thing you notice. This is the selvage edge and along here is the overlocked edge where I put it through the wash. Yeah, the print is on the diagonal. It has sat in my stash for a long time and I just wasn't really sure what to do with it. After I filmed my spring plans video and it was hanging around, I thought, you know what, I just want to get this made up. So you may know that I've been having some success lately with a pair of Vogue cargo trousers. In fact, I'm wearing them right now. And my first thought with this fabric was, let's just make another pair of those. They would be a useful summer trouser. I got the pattern out. I know what alterations I need to make. So I laid the pattern out, and that is when I noticed that the broken stripes run diagonally. I honestly had not paid any attention to it before. It was just in the stash and I just thought of it as a broken stripe fabric. But once I had it laid on the table on the fold and I was thinking about cutting out these trousers, I realised, oh, if I cut trousers on the straight grain, the pattern is going to run diagonally across my body and around each leg. And I just thought, that's going to look weird. I considered it, but to me, and I'm sure this is just a personal preference thing, I didn't fancy a diagonal stripe on a pair of trousers. So my next thought was a skirt, just a simple gathered skirt, the full width of the fabric gathered onto elastic. I've made them before, I do always wear them. And as I was looking at the fabric, I was thinking, do I want the stripes on the cross grain or on the grain? And as I kept twisting my head and looking at it, I realized, oh, if I cut it on the bias, the stripes will be horizontal. So in an instant, the decision was made. This was going to be a bias cut skirt. As I say, it's been in the stash for so long. Isn't it funny where when you suddenly get the inspiration for the perfect thing, you just know. So I wanted a bias cut skirt. I had about 2 hours for sewing. Did I have a pattern for a bias cut skirt? No, I didn't. Did I want to download one? I really didn't, for a couple of reasons. I wanted a kind of not maxi but not midi length skirt in between, but pretty long. And I just immediately thought that's going to be a huge pattern piece, so much paper, so much taping. I also didn't want to pay for one, to be frank. So I did what any self-respecting YouTuber would do, and I just looked on YouTube for a tutorial for a bias cut skirt without a pattern. Now, this probably is not the correct way to do a bias skirt. I'm sure there's a more technical approach. Yes, I could have bought and taped a pattern, but you know what? I wasn't sure that I was going to like a bias cut skirt. I've never owned one before. I wasn't in love with the fabric, mainly because it faded when I washed it. It started off a really clear black and white. I put it through a pre-wash and the colours ran. And honestly, I can't decide now if it's like a chocolate brown or a charcoal, but it is no longer stark black and stark white. It was an inexpensive fabric that was annoying me. And I thought, you know what? The worst that can happen is I give it a go. I enjoy the process. I have some fun making it. And in the end, I don't love it. That's not really a waste of my time, is it? So I will link the tutorial that I used below. It was really, really good. I would definitely recommend. She took the approach of quartering waist and hip measurements and actually drawing out paper pattern pieces to be cut on the fold. I wasn't sure about cutting on the fold on the bias. That seemed a bit tricky to me. But anyway, I took her general theory, laid my fabric out on the floor completely flat, and then decided to, using basically the figures that she's given, draw it out straight onto the fabric and just avoid the paper altogether. Even just drawing it out onto paper, I knew the pattern paper I had wouldn't be wide enough. I'd have to stick it together. I was just in the mood to have some fun. So I drew out with chalk the outline, and I will put a picture in showing you the measurements that I went with. For reference, my waist is 79 centimetres and my hips are 97. And I chose to cut the waist at 50 centimetres. So double that is 1 metre, which gives 3 centimetres for seam allowances and ease to get it over the hips, because the way this is constructed is an elasticated waist that I'll show you. It's so clever, actually. It looks flat, but the elastic is in there to allow you to get it on and off over your hips. But when you're wearing it, there's no obvious elastic or waist seam. I really am so pleased with it. So yeah, I did 50 across. I carried the line on out to my hip, and I said earlier I don't have a bias cut skirt pattern. I do have a bias cut dress pattern, the Georgia's Portfolio Mellow Dress. So once I'd drawn it out onto my fabric in chalk, I went and got that pattern and just laid it on top just to make sure I wasn't a million miles out, and it all looked fine. So I was fairly confident. In the instructions for the mellow dress, Georgia gives you really good info on laying things out in the bias. And when you are cutting the dress, she tells you if your fabric's laid out like that, to cut one like that and one like that, rather than the front like that and the back like that, if that makes sense. You have to rotate it. Now, on this striped fabric, if I had done that, the front would have had the stripes going this way, but the back would have had the stripes going up and down. And I definitely didn't want that. But I also didn't want to lay them out like that because Georgia had said not to. So I couldn't do that. Didn't want to do that. So I did that, if that makes sense. So they were going in the same direction, but I rotated it. If you know more about cutting things on the bias, and let's be honest, 99% of you will know more than me, please do share in the comments below whether that was the right thing to do, the wrong thing to do. I'm really happy with how it hangs. My seams aren't twisting or bubbling at all, which I think is what you're trying to avoid. But look, new to sewing on the bias, I'm not pretending to be an expert, and I love learning from you guys because you know so much. So that's how I cut it out. The treatment I did for the seams was to overlock both side seams, just literally run them straight through the overlocker, and then I sewed them together with a narrow zigzag. And again, that is advice from the Mellow Dress pattern, and it means your seams don't ripple. If you watched the first vlog where I made the mellow, you will know I was trying to be cleverer than the pattern and I didn't follow her directions. And on my very first mellow top, I got very ripply seams. So this is definitely the way to go. I've moved it around on the hanger. So can you see the side seam there? I think you barely can, and that is testament to how well that has worked, because on my very first bias cut garment, the side seam was all kinds of ripply. On that one, I think I overlocked them together. I can't remember, but I didn't sew it with a narrow zigzag. That is what seems to work better. Overlocking the edge separately and then sewing with a narrow zigzag. So once I had both side seams done and pressed open, it was time for the waist treatment. And I got a 1-inch piece of elastic and zigzagged it along the top, right side out. So I quartered the elastic, which I just cut to my waist measurement. I cut it 79 centimetres. I zigzagged it to a scrap so as not to add bulk. And then I quartered it. I quartered the skirt and I just sewed it right sides together with the skirt with a zigzag stitch, stretching the elastic so that all the quarter points met. And when I got back round to the front, I was done. I then flipped it in again, and just stitched in the ditch on the side seams. And it gives this beautiful finish where inside you can't see the elastic, but from the outside you can't see any stitching or waistband. I will say, when I put it on, I do have to just make sure that the elastic is tucked correctly. But after that, it stays exactly where it is. It's so comfortable, and I think it just looks so elegant. And compared to my other skirt, where I did just gather a full width of fabric onto the elastic, this is much more comfortable because this fabric that sits against your skin is smooth. On the other one, it's all bunched around an elastic waistband and gathered, and that is a bit, it's not itchy, but it's kind of like prickly, bumpy. I can feel it. Whereas this, because the fabric is completely flat, I don't feel it, and yet look at that. It stretches enough to go over my hips. Amazing. I'm not even exaggerating when I tell you that within 1.5 hours of deciding I wanted a bias cut skirt, I had it made to that point, literally, and that included like 7 minutes or whatever to watch the tutorial. I could have completely finished it that day, except I'd cut it on the bias, so I wanted to hang it and let everything drop before I hemmed it. Now, hemming was a bit of a challenge because it did drop, of course it did, not evenly, obviously, as bias cut garments don't. And the issue I had was, this does give stripe. It is a stripe. So when it came to hemming it, I didn't want to even it up by chopping through a stripe, because I felt like it could make it look even more uneven through an optical illusion, if that makes sense. I'll hold it up and show you the bottom, and I've just done the best job I could. I've been back and forth on it a few times. I think when I'm wearing it, as you'll see in the modelled footage, it looks good. So it definitely was a balancing act. I'm not sure how good a job I've done on it, but it was the best I could do. And it was quite tricky to hem. I just did a double turned hem. Lengthwise, I've showed in the picture of how I laid out the length, and I ended up cutting off about 5 centimetres of that. So it did come out a bit longer than I wanted, but I was using up basically the whole width of fabric anyway, so I thought better to cut it longer, and then I had options with the hem. It's always easier to shorten it, isn't it? This is what the skirt looks like. I'm wearing it here with a white cotton top, and it's a bit too stiff. I think a t-shirt would be better, and also I do feel like this just emphasizes how the stripes are no longer white, but in principle, I like it. So that is my bias cut skirt. As I say, I would recommend the tutorial. This was so quick and easy. If you've got a piece of fabric you don't know what to do with and some elastic in the stash, you can literally have such a skirt made in a couple of hours. And I am genuinely so pleased with it. I love this now. I like the fabric, I like the skirt. One thing does always lead to another with me, and I don't have the perfect top to wear with it, but don't you worry, I've already got something on the cutting table. I hope you enjoyed hearing about my skirt, and I hope to see you again soon to show you the top I'm making to go with it. Bye.